like to call to order the regular City Council meeting of December 13, 2010 with a roll call, please.
Mayor Martini?
Here.
City Clerk Patterson here. Council members Ratty? Here. Lawson?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Kerrigan?
Here.
Schmidt?
Here.
City Manager Carey?
Here.
City Attorney Adams?
Here. Okay, if you'd all stand for the invocation, Pastor Phil Vanna of the Summit Christian Church. Welcome, Pastor.
Thank you. Please bow your heads. Father, I thank you for this wonderful day, just to be here, to be able to meet like this. Father, I pray that your presence would be here, just presiding over these conversations. I pray you give these men and women clarity for the different things that they're discussing and deciding upon for this great city. And I pray you give them wisdom in the decisions that they're going to make. And I just pray your blessing in this time upon this city, upon this whole valley. Just even as these are hard economic times, I just pray that you would be honored by the decisions that are made, and that you'd receive all the glory and all the praise for what goes on. And we just thank you, God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you for those words, Pastor. We appreciate it. If you'd remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, Mr. Smith, would you lead us, please?
Absolutely. Will you join me, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next is comments from the public. First, I'd like to introduce one of our representative from the county, City of Sparks, is Commissioner Bob Larkin. Welcome, Bob. He said he wasn't going to speak. Okay, good. You can stay then. Okay, comments from the public. I only have one card. If you want to speak, please fill out a card with the clerk. Will give you one, and we'll have you up for 3 minutes. I have one. It's Perry DiLoretto. Mr. DiLoretto, come on up. Yep. Is the blue light on?
No, the computer.
Yeah, it's on.
Your Honor, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Perry DiLoretto. I appreciate the opportunity to come and address you today. I don't know what your policy is for public comment. Is it 2 minutes?
3 minutes.
3 minutes, thank you. I will certainly respect that. Yesterday, or I believe Friday, a letter was hand-delivered to each of you. I've tried to read that letter in 3 minutes. It can't be done.
Yeah.
So what I would ask you to please enter that letter in its entirety into your public record, and I will briefly try and paraphrase what my comments were regarding. Having to do with the Reno Tahoe International Airport and the authority that governs the airport. I have not paid a lot of attention to airport board meetings over the years, but I recently attended one, and I wish to address the airport authority on an agenda item having to do with a new contract and compensation package for the CEO of the airport. I made it very clear in my opening statements that there was nothing personal, or my comments were not to be taken in a personal nature, but I was just trying to address a circumstance. There was a motion made to do the following: to grant the CEO a retroactive 15% bonus to last year, a retroactive 3% increase in pay, a new 3-year contract with an increase of 4% per year for that contract period. In addition, a $120,000 signing bonus to the new contract. In addition to that, a $180,000 retention bonus for the 3-year period. In addition, an additional 20% per year bonus over base pay could be earned, but a minimum of 5% of that amount would be guaranteed each year, and all normal contributions for pension, health insurance, car allowances, association dues, etc. would be continued. Before the vote was taken, I asked if I could please be told what the total compensation package was. At that time, I was told that is not public information, as the CEO of the airport is not considered to be a public official. I certainly don't believe that is the case, and based on that, I have raised these issues. By the way, that motion passed 7-1. The judgment as to whether that is appropriate or not has to be left to our elected officials, because you are the ones that appoint people to the airport authority. Although there is some constraint, a significant amount of constraint in the law as to what interaction you can have with those trustees once they are appointed. So I've set out to raise this issue. I appeared at the Reno City Council last week. I'm appearing before you today with all due respect, again, I would like to state there is nothing personal about the issue of the airport. I respect every one of the people that sits on the airport authority. I know them personally. I've served on boards and commissions with them in the past. But something is not exactly right when we can look at a pay package in a new contract that runs so contrary to the realization of the economic conditions which we and all of our three governments are facing. I believe that was the bell that just went off, so with that, I would like to call. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. DiLorenzo? Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. DiLorenzo, thank you for coming and bringing this issue on up to the council. And just for your information, the council, this has been a problem for a long time. It's been many as 6 years ago that we brought up the issue of not being able to communicate with our representatives. We get to appoint 2 members of that board, and from the day that we make the appointment, we virtually cannot talk to them. We can't express our opinion on what they should be doing. We can't hold them accountable for their actions on it. So this is truly I agree with you that it's a public body. I think they are a public body, but it's one that has no representation of the citizens of the community, because once it passes from us to them, we have very little recourse to go back on this, and so it's a taxation authority with no citizens' representation at all, in my opinion.
May I respond, Mr. Mayor? This authority pays no taxes. This authority has a power of condemnation. They have a police department that are sworn officers throughout the state. They are responsible for one of the major economic engines in this community. Again, I would state that I think it is a well-run airport. It's clean. It's efficient. The infrastructure is well cared for. But there is, by design, no public accountability. I was here in 1977 when the Airport Authority was established. It used to belong, Reno Airport belonged to Reno. It was literally, by legislation, taken away from Reno for the reasons that there was no transparency and people really didn't know what was going on. 33 years later, we have a much nicer and a larger airport, but we have no transparency and people don't know what's going on. There has to be balance somewhere in between those two models.
I agree. Thank you.
You know, Perry, I agree with you. And as far as the airport people coming to us once in a while with an update, it happens, but probably not often enough. As far as being able to talk to them, you know, I converse with them, especially Joe Mayer, because I've known Joe for a long time. So talk to him, you know, a lot when I need to ask questions about the airport. He's always forthcoming when he can be. So is there any appetite for the council? Well, we need to get our representatives here, Sean. And I think Adam is working on that. But maybe it might be something we might want to agendize and have a full-blown discussion about the airport and our representation.
Right. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayberry has been working to get the airport representatives here. They were unavailable in January, but have set a date for February, if that will work with the council.
Okay.
You have another appointment coming up in July. Mr. Mayor will be
Yes, we'll
turned
be
out.
leaving, yes.
And I believe that there are some people very interested in discussing this with our state legislature and seeing if we couldn't get this governance model changed. You know, this is a tough thing for a businessman such as myself to stand up and publicly criticize a board. But, you know, if it's, I believe that the actions and the way they took place just aren't right. And I hope that my comments would please be taken in that context only.
And I think you understand as well as the rest of us up here, we have no control anymore after we appoint them over the appointees we make to the airport, and that was done by legislation, if I'm not mistaken. So we would rather have it the other way around, where we can have our input and let them know what the citizens of Sparks think, but not the way. But again, I talk to them whenever I can. Ms. Ratty has a question or a comment.
Thank you again for coming and spending the time. I guess my comment would be, I'd be really interested in knowing what some of the business leaders in the community think is an appropriate modification to the current system. I think we continually run up against questions about places where we're trying to find the best mix of sort of a private sector approach and a government approach. And, you know, just thinking off the top of my head, whether that be REMSA, what's been going on with Hot August Nights, the Airport Authority as a quasi-governmental role. We like the benefits of having the flexibility and not having to follow all the rules that is, you know, comes along with being a government agency. And at the same time, we don't like it when we lose the authority, when things go in a direction that we don't necessarily agree with. And I do think there's probably not a perfect solution, but I would be interested in not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because I think one of the reasons the airport has been so successful is because it does operate under that quasi-model. It does generate a lot of its own revenue. It does have a lot of freedom to make decisions and not get hung up in some of the process and bureaucracy that comes with being a part of the government. At the same time, I completely hear what you're saying. That doesn't sound like it's in tune with what's going on in our community right now. So I just want to make sure that it's a thoughtful approach that really saves both of those aspects, accountability to the taxpayers, as well as that I don't want to say freedom, but that flexibility that comes with having some of the aspects of the private sector.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's hard to justify, though, a lack of transparency or not following a system to produce certain results. And I think it just needs to see the light of day. We need to air it out and have some more discussions on what exactly are you able to do better, because you don't have to be fully public accountable.
Right.
And given that opportunity, it just seems to me at least some elected representation or some elected oversight. We get, as the public, get to come back to you every election cycle and tell you how we feel about what you're doing. An appointee on the Airport Authority is for 4 years. And the reappointment is all but automatic. So for 8 years, in most cases, you have an appointed official that pretty much doesn't have to explain themselves.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know what I think bothers me the most? It's very excessive, but in 2009 they voted not to take any raises, and in 2010 they gave her a 15% retroactive bonus back to 2009 and a 3% retroactive pay increase back to 2009. So the vote they took in 2009 really didn't mean anything. So this does not cover her car allowance and her PERS contribution either.
PERS contribution, we were able to find out, by the way, she is covered by PERS, almost $75,000.
Right.
Car allowance, we were able to find out, it's $12,000 a year.
$12,000.
Association fees to the airport associations that she belongs to was $46,000. A lot of money being spent.
Right.
And I'm not questioning whether it's appropriate or whether, but it's still, if you want to decide whether it's public or not, I mean, the fact that you don't get any tax revenue, I mean, the public is giving something back. There's federal tax dollars that go into supporting that airport.
You know,
So even
and I
if
think
the feds is still tax.
And I think we should really find out how her salary compares to some of the airports, even in Nevada.
Yes. Well, until we know the base pay, we can't put a total handle on the package. We've made our supposition, but we know that on Transparent in Nevada, you can look up the manager of McCarran Airport.
I have.
And he has 5 airports in total, 7th busiest in the country, and his total package pales compared to this one.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lawson.
Thank you, Mr. DeVero, for being here. I just have one question. Is what specifically would you like to see come out of this?
From the city of Sparks?
Yes.
I would like to see you, first of all, pay very close attention, not suggesting that you haven't, to your next appointment as it comes up, and possibly do an agenda item so that you can discuss openly with the public about what goes on and whether or not you should participate in requesting changes to the governance model of the Airport Authority. Your Honor, thank you for your time and
More,
courtesy.
Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is more for the city attorney office. Have we made any formal request for this type of information in the past or anything from the Airport Authority?
No, we haven't. I would imagine anybody could ask, make a public records request, and then you would get whatever response you would from
It has
either.
been denied.
And who denied that?
The Reno Tahoe, or the Reno Airport Aviation Association, which is a group of general aviation users, asked for the information, and they received a letter from counsel, Jones Vargas and Morgan, that said that that information was not public, maybe not made available. I should point out that on this Thursday's agenda, which I just got on a Friday from the Airport Authority, there is now an agenda item to discuss a bylaw. I don't remember exactly what it is. I think it's bylaw number 9225 of the Airport Authority, having to do with the disclosure of the CEO's compensation. So I think there is some notice being taken about this. But no, it has been denied. And there was another, Nevada Policy Research Institute has made a request under FOIA, Freedom of Information, for that. They have not responded yet.
Recently, I mean, the grounds were, this is not a public document because we're not a public entity, or?
Something like that. Or we have a bylaw that says we're not going to do it, but,
You know, you've got it, they have additional recourse, of course, with the courts, and the press is always making requests, and when they don't get what they want, we're in court the next day, so.
yeah, you know, at the end of the day, none of us are interested in any kind of a combative situation. We're in a period of time where we need to have people comfortable and working together and in the right frame of mind, and it's not our intention to start anything. It's just, let's get this out in the open and talk about it.
Good enough, sir. That's, I mean, unless you can make a public records request and want to follow up on it, sir.
My question has to do with our appointment to the board. What is the legal obligation of our appointment if we ask for information from our appointee?
You know, it's like when I sit on this board, and then I sit on the Civil Service Commission. My allegiances are somewhat tweaked a little bit, in that I owe my allegiance to ultimately the city, but it's my job to advise that board and conduct business accordingly. I haven't looked into that, but I would suspect, sir, that anybody serving on that board would probably be relegated to following the rules, regulations, procedures, bylaws of that particular board that I don't know that we could necessarily force them to violate to give us additional information.
And that's
legislatively mandated, I think.
That's where my question comes into, is what is the responsibility of our appointee to the city council? Is it, we've got this come and report to us whenever you think is necessary to report to us, is basically the responsibility we give them. Do we have the ability to give them more responsibility?
Well, that would, in one respect, that would be a policy decision by this board, tempered by the laws of the state of Nevada, and perhaps the federal government as well.
Thank you.
I think we need to know what the legislative mandate is here with our appointees. I don't know that we can direct them to do anything, and maybe Mr. Larry's shaking his head yes, so okay. All right, I got one more question, then we'll move on. Mr. Smith.
Just a comment, Perry, you said you presented this same thing in front of the Reno Council. It baffles me sometimes, if we don't take our 7.5% decrease in pay every year, that it would be on the front page of the newspaper saying that, you know, this guy doesn't want to give up any money. But then a package like this is offered to somebody, and I haven't read a thing about it.
Neither have I. That's why I'm here.
Thank you.
You've been very generous with your time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, and I appreciate bringing it to us. Okay, next is approval of the agenda. Anybody want to take anything out of order? You know what, one before I go on is, I forgot to ask, anyone else under public comment for it? Last chance? Okay. Approval of the agenda, looking for a motion. Mr. Smith.
Move to approve.
Do you have a second? Ms. Ratty. Second. Moved by Councilman Smith, seconded by Councilwoman Ratty to approve the agenda as outlined by staff. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Passes unanimously. Next is recommendation to approve minutes of the regular meeting of November 22nd, 2010. Any additions, corrections, or deletions? If not, looking for a motion. Ms. Ratty.
Move to approve the minutes as presented.
Do you have a second? Second. Okay, it's been moved by Councilwoman Ratty, seconded by Councilman Lawson to approve the minutes as outlined by staff. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Passes unanimously. Announcements, presentations. Presentation on the Sparks Citizens Advisory Committee's prioritization of budget items. Mr. Mayberry and Mr. Bonine, I believe. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, council members. Adam Mayberry, Community Relations Manager for the record. I'm pleased to present to you the Sparks Citizens Advisory Committee Chairman, Eddie Benign. He's going to give you an overview on an assignment that they embarked on for the last 8 or 9 months or so. If you recall, earlier, well, about a year ago, we passed a resolution that formalized the Citizens Advisory Committee to a more formal process, to an appointment process. So all of you have 3 representatives, including an alternate that represent each ward in the city, as well as 3 appointments by the mayor. It's been a very effective and well-organized group of individuals that have been dedicated and been working with us since March. They have taken on a project that Eddie will give you a quick overview on that will provide you, I think, with some tools to help you begin to make some decisions as we begin to craft the 2011 budget in the next budget cycle. So having said that, I'll introduce Eddie and turn it over to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Council, Mr. Mayor, first of all, I want to publicly thank Adam for the opportunity on behalf of our Sparks Citizens Advisory Committee to thank Adam. He has single-handedly kept this committee on task and as our facilitator and our liaison. So, Adam, I want to thank you for your efforts with us. During the course of the past year, the Sparks Citizens Advisory Committee was charged with assisting in prioritizing the essential services that are offered through the city, and some of those services that are limited. Yet, on the other hand, we have 4 or 5 or 6 areas in which we addressed. For example, public safety, public works, parks and recreation, whether economic development or it's the development of the city itself. The Sparks Citizens Advisory Committee asked and accepted the task, moved forward beginning in the month of May, approximately in year 2010. Initially, the committee heard a presentation from city staff referencing the City of Sparks strategic plan and the review of city's annual public attitude survey. I'd like to thank City Manager Mr. Carey, his assistant Mr. Driscoll, and the administrative assistant Teresa Gardner for providing all that information to our committee and coming forward with that information. In June of this year, Sparks City Finance Director Jeff Cronk presented to the committee a local government budget 101 in service that really laid the groundwork for our future and all of our workshops that we held. In the months leading up to October this year, we had the privilege of meeting and listening to each City of Sparks department directors. Each department leader explained to the committee their department's respective role, their services, all the services they provide, the challenges they are facing, and will continue to face in these economic times. However, before I go any further, let me say this. Every representative from every city Sparks department that came before a committee were professional, were very well prepared, very knowledgeable, poised, and very passionate within their respective departments. So on behalf of our committee, I'd like to take this opportunity to publicly thank them for their time, their effort with the presentation materials, and for their daily dedication to our city. The committee met with and was educated by the following departments: Public Works, Police, Fire, Community Development, Parks and Recreation, the City Attorney's Office, and our municipal courts. Besides gathering informational data from these respective departments and their presentations, the committee also gathered information from our citizens, be it from our neighbors, friends, our colleagues. Each committee member utilized similar but somewhat different communicative methods to survey. Regardless of the survey style or the tool in which we used, committee members were attaining the thoughts and opinions from across our city wards, asking the questions regarding the value and priority of their city's essential services. The results of those conversations and communications with the city identified approximately 25 different categories. These can be located on slide number 5 or the slide that's visible within the chambers. On Saturday, November 13th, 2010, the committee convened and began the process of placing a value on the various categories defined in the city services through the citizen survey results. As you may see by seeing these categories, we have overlaps between departments. Hence, on Wednesday, November 17th, on 2010, the committee reconvened and collectively disseminated all the data that was received by percentages. This exercise resulted in what we came up with the top 5 key categories in which the majority of the services would all fall. Those results are as follows, and the percentages. Public safety, 35.5%. Public works, 26.2%. Parks and recreation, 21.3%. Development, 12%. City attorney and municipal courts, 5%. For each category's individual percentage and their breakdowns, please reference the bottom of page 3 and pages 4, 5, and 6 in your committee report. I personally like to publicly thank all of our committee members for their time, effort, and consistent workshop attendance. Kevin Edwards, Ward 1, Nancy Price, Ward 1, William Williams, Ward 2, David Hanson, Ward 2, Dick Doherty, Ward 3, Charles Johns, Ward 3, Ardina Perry, Ward 4, Gregory Bishop, Ward 5, and Connie Anderson, Ward 5, who is present here this afternoon, sitting there in the back. Also Doug Bowles, who is a mayor appointee, and Jeanette Ramirez, who is also a mayor appointee. Last but surely not least, Lorraine Scher, who is my co-chair representing Ward 2, could not be present this afternoon, and Jack Byram, who's a mayor appointee, was a secretary. So if there's a flaw in any of the publications we have, or you need to talk to Jack, he's the person that was taking notes. But he does a great job in actually putting together minutes that look like the meeting that we attended and workshops. In closing, I just want to say the following. Serving on this committee and participating in this particular assignment has enlightened all of your committee members. This educational experience is one I wish all Sparks citizens could experience for themselves. I also want to go on record as stating the following. The committee recognizes that any and all information provided to council today is merely input and feedback, which we hope will assist you, all of you, in the coming weeks when you take on the monumental task of preparing the fiscal 2011-2012 budget for our city. Any and or all of the committee will be available at your request to meet and discuss any portion of this report, or I'll be more than happy to discuss any of the report as in your packet at this time.
Thanks, Eddie. Appreciate it, and I'm sure there's going to be some questions, but for me, thank you so much for all the hard work all of you did. I know it wasn't easy, a lot of information, and you guys took a lot of time to do it. I know Adam's been reporting back to me, so we appreciate it. We appreciate the input. And I know you called me and asked me if there was anything I wanted to see out of this report, and I said, you know what, Eddie? No. I want to see from your eyes and your group's eyes what you think is best for us to be looking at. So that's what I was looking at, was an opinion from other people other than what I thought. And I think these are very good report, and I appreciate it. Questions, Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also thank you very much, and all the committee members for their time in doing this. Is a great exercise, and I think Mr. Kerrigan put it had been a long time since we've actually seen some constructive input on things. We appreciate it very, very much. And just when I look at the numbers and everything else like that, I look and say, okay, how does this reconcile with what we do today? And maybe I should just ask if you looked at with the exercise, you're trying to say that for every dollar, 35% should go into public safety, or is of the 5 categories you had, 35% would go into those categories? And I guess, how does that reflect with today's budget? You got presentations from all the departments. In public safety, we spend 65%, 70% of all of our dollars in public safety. That's about half of what you say here today. Any thoughts about that? How the committee felt about that, or is there a different side of feel of things that the numbers don't show?
My take on the results was the 35.5% was the results survey that we had was recommending that amount, not necessarily dollar spent, but that was a response of the results for public safety. And as I mentioned in there, each one of those incrementally is broken down within your report, which it describes what the public safety piece would be within that, as well as public works, which defined what exactly all the citizens were referencing there. I don't know if Jack wants to come forward and give his take on it as well, because he was very instrumental in assisting in the guidance of that committee.
You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, what's a feel here? I mean, is it 35% is saying that is about where we're at today? If we turn the numbers, or do we go back and look at numbers and say, I don't take Park and Recs, we're saying basically one of every $5 we have to spend on services go to Parks and Recs and we're not there, does that mean that underlying there's an issue that we don't have Parks and Recs completely covered for the city?
Councilman Schmidt, Jack Byram, one of the committee members. One important thing that occurred for me and was reflected by many comments from the committee members was every time we got in a conversation, no matter which tool we were using, visiting a homeowners association, visiting a professional association, or just talking to neighbors, is we had to explain the services first. Just walking in and saying, what do you think about public safety? You'd have to have a whole series of questions from them. What do you mean? And so we spend an awful lot of time just educating people first. So when you see our results, whatever tool we used, and then we would mark down and they'd say, I like this, or I think that's important, then we ended up with this fairly significant different sets of definitions. And that's the reason we started grouping them, because we'd say, okay, if we compare that, as you said, to the current system, and how are we organized, and let alone how is it allocated for funding, then we had to try to reshape that based upon what people perceived as what the service was. So I'd say this is our reflection from talking to people, first trying to help them understand even what the service might be, or if it even existed, and then regrouping that into this. So it may not, as you just described, align very well with the way we're organized.
It's just not apples and oranges, but it's fruit in the category that,
It's how they perceive.
How they perceived it. Okay. All right. Thank you. Great. Appreciate it.
Mr. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I want to thank the committee. Like Ron said, I've been asking for 11 years for the committee to advise us before we actually voted on something, which is what I always thought the committee should do. And I want to thank you for getting, this to us before we were actually making any kind of decision. But I also want to say that there was, maybe one or two surprises for me. And I know where you're coming from as far as if the public doesn't understand what services. We had a problem with the public not understanding the budget system, and we took Adam and said, okay, Adam, this is, please do this. Go educate the public. And so he had a campaign to do that. And I think this is a perfect time to educate the public on what services we provide, because if anybody's been following what's going on down in Carson City, some of the state services may get shifted down to the local level. Some of the local services may get shifted up to the state level. Well, whatever it may be, this is a perfect time before February to let everybody know exactly what the cities are responsible for right now. And so I thank you for that. And the one surprise that I saw on this, and this will make Julia happy, was code enforcement. So, that was up there pretty high, and that surprised me.
And that would come from those conversations. If you say code enforcement to people, then they go, well, what do you mean? You say, well, that's people that come out to your house, or if you're going to get a building permit, or you've got a complaint that you're trying to file back through the city, it will probably flow through this this definition of a code enforcement.
Yeah, I think some of the foreclosures and some of the way that some of the properties are looking right now, people are understanding what code enforcement does. So, but my thanks to all of you. That was hard work on, it was, 1,500, I guess you had 1,500 people respond, which is a big number of people. And so thank you very much for the input. This is very, very helpful.
Mr. Harrigan, thank you for the appointment. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, and you forgot to say that you were also an appointment on this. You thanked everybody, so I'm going to thank you as my other appointee.
Thank you.
Mr. Ratty.
I guess a couple of questions. In this process of going out and talking to folks, did you talk to people about the fact that public safety is almost 2/3 of the budget? Did people grasp that when you were having the conversations with them?
They did with the individuals with whom I spoke to, and that was one of the first, if not the first and foremost responses is, well, what does this mean when it comes to fire response, or what does this mean when it comes to police response? Do we have to wait for an additional fire truck to get there? Do we have to, they had been reading and or educating themselves on that piece because it was real for all of them. That was something that was a real concern. And if they needed police response and backup, was it going to take 12 minutes, or is there patrol in the area where it'll take, another response vehicle will be there in less than 3 minutes? So that was real. That part was real, and yes, they understood the dollar amount that's presently encumbered for public safety.
So then, is it fair to say that there's two messages in this allocation? One that is that public safety got allocated by far as the highest number, but it also, everything else also was highly valued. I mean, is that the two messages that come out of here?
Yes, ma'am, that's what I would say, yes.
And then I just have another question moving beyond this is, one of the things we've struggled with is what is the role of the Citizen Advisory Committee? And so have you guys had conversations moving past this, or has it all been to getting this done, and what role you see the committee playing moving forward?
We'll double team that if we may. We all submitted application to be a part of this volunteer group and to assist any way we can to be the mouthpiece going in or coming out of for the council. And then this particular task came on, and this task has encompassed all of our time to this particular juncture. We're willing to take any recommendations from this point further. We'll continue to meet and work. We are going to take a break for about a month or so. We will come back, I believe, in January, I believe is what we discussed, for a form of debriefing after council meets, and just kind of go through the process again, and again, make ourselves available to any and everybody upon return here or if at one of our committee meetings. And then we'll decide what that process is. But I think the present redefined Sparks Citizens Advisory Committee format is a step in the right direction. This is my personal opinion, and we're willing to take any input from anybody in this room and or in the community on what they think that committee should be. But we're going to make ourselves accessible to not only to the council, but to our citizens, our respective wards in our great city of Sparks. Jack?
Yeah, it appears that, number one, they're very energized. So after going through a project like this with such focus, that was kind of our debriefing at the end of the meeting the other day was, okay, are we done with this? And we said, we don't know. May or may not be. And they said, well, what do you think that we'll be doing next? We said, we're not sure. We understand the charter, and we all understood why we signed up to be appointed to this. But in general, everybody was looking forward to, well, that'll be interesting to see what the council is going to advise us as to what they're looking for in the future. So we also need your input, but we'll probably have a session, I believe, in the next one where we're going to say, has anybody got any ideas of something they'd like to address?
Thank you.
Mr. Lawson.
I want to thank the SCAC. I was able to attend their meeting last Thursday night, and I have nothing but high praise for you guys. Number one, you're giving your time. Just a lot of time and effort went into this. But what I was most impressed by is the questions that were asked by the different members. There's a very educated group now, and I don't know where you started from, but from my experience just recently campaigning, you are very, very educated, and that's nice to see that you've made that step. So personally, I look forward to working with you guys going forward because I think you got a great group, highly motivated, as you said, and that's fun to see.
What's fun, they're not shy.
Yeah, that was true, too.
Yeah, looking down the names, I can tell you they're not shy, including you two guys. Well, thank you. Great job. Good report. One of the best ever, I think, I've ever seen out of the Citizens Advisory Committee, I believe so. Keep up the good work, and, let us know what's going on. Adam will keep us up to date, so. Thanks, Eddie. Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, item 4.2 is a presentation of a flag flown over new Kabul compound, Kabul, Afghanistan. The Colonel.
Good afternoon.
Welcome, Colonel.
Mayor, members of the council, I'm Joanne Meacham, Utility Manager for the City of Sparks. Thank you for just a few moments out of your time to present this flag to you. I am a citizen soldier, and I wanted to start out by talking about the concept of a citizen soldier, what it is, why we do what we do. The Constitution of the United States requires each state to maintain a militia. In our state, we have Nevada military departments composed of Air Guard and Army Guard. I am a member of the Nevada Air National Guard. There are 1,200 members in that unit. Of those, 1,000 of us are citizen soldiers. That means we go to work every day. Most of the time we're a citizen, and 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, we're a soldier. until, in time of need of our nation when the president calls us up, or in time of need of our state when the governor can call us up. In my case, I was mobilized by the president in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. I had the opportunity to fly halfway around the world and work in Kabul, Afghanistan, and the higher headquarters for all United States forces. And my role there in logistics is to field the force, that is bring all our troops in, protect the force, that is build bases and give them training, and sustain them. And that's the 4 Bs, the bombs, bullets, blood, and beans, food. So while I was gone, there was, energy and effort back here at the City of Sparks that really made a difference for me to be able to give my full effort to the war fight. The City of Sparks policies in place, in the admin rules, and in the bargaining unit contracts, and in my case the mid-man contract, are so supportive of the citizen soldier concept. And as a commander in the Air Guard, I work with a lot of troops who don't have that kind of support and backing from their employees. And it really makes a difference. Having those in place is what we call a force multiplier. Because I don't have concerns about my finances, because I don't have concerns about whether or not I'll have a job when I get home, I am able to apply myself to the job, which is support the warfighters in Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan who are hurting. In this case, the people who bore the brunt of my absence was the public works staff. They were amazing. That includes, the engineering group, the staff out at Tom Wharf. My duties were spread throughout the city, and they covered for me. They were willing, and they were able, and they are the ones that really, truly deserve this flag. So with that being said, I'll read you the certificate and present it to you. I have to tell you the story about flying this flag. I flew on July 4th over the compound, and now I have to tell you the significance of this compound is it is the higher headquarters of all United States head forces. It is General Petraeus' headquarters. And it was an honor and a privilege to be there at this time, working with the bringing in the presidential force uplift of 30,000 troops. While I was there, we brought in 30,000 troops, all of their base building equipment, and established lines of supply for them. And it was a challenging job, also very rewarding. The day, on 4th of July, we decided to fly flags over the compound for our ammo troops throughout the theater. At the end of the supply line, you got some private in the Army who's there issuing bombs and bullets to our warfighter. We wanted them to know that we were there for them. We wanted them to know that they could call on their higher headquarters. And we sent a flag to each and every one of them that was flown on July 4th over the compound. I had the opportunity to fly 2 flags, and I flew one for my father, and I flew one for the City of Sparks. So the certificate reads, the certificate of authenticity is to verify that this flag was flown above the new Kabul compound in Kabul, Afghanistan on 4 July 2010, while this command was supporting Operation Enduring Freedom. The officers, non-commissioned officers, soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and civilians of this command appreciate your support and dedication to all members of the armed forces deployed in harm's way. Your continued support and generosity will be appreciated by all members of the armed forces for many years. So with that, I'll say thank you very much for your support.
Thank you, Joanna. Appreciate it.
She thought that I was tucked up in my bedroom flat.
Let her get away. She was out of here quick. Okay. Wonderful presentation. We really appreciate all our employees that serve so that we can serve here and keep the city of Sparks moving. Joanne's a tremendous asset to our city, as well as the others that do the same thing, and there's plenty of them. So, and the ones that stay behind, too. Let's never forget them. So thank you very much, all of you. Consent items. Anybody want to pull a consent item? Five 1 through 518. If not, looking for a motion. Mr. Smith.
Move to approve consent items 5.1 through 518.
You have a second? Mr. Schmidt.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Smith, seconded by Councilman Schmidt to approve consent items 5.1 through 5.18. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Passes unanimously. Moving on to general business, consideration and possible appointment to the Sparks Advisory Committee for the Disabled. Nothing to say? I've recommended, along with the committee, Mr. Jim Casson. Any discussion? Mr. Kerrigan.
Move for approval.
Do I have a second? Mr. Schmidt.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Kerrigan, seconded by Councilman Schmidt to approve Jim Casson on the Advisory Committee for the Disabled. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Passes unanimously. 6.2, consideration and possible acceptance of a grant from the E.L. Cord Foundation in the amount of $2,500 for the City of Sparks Parks and Recreation Department to reinstate the senior day trip and breakfast with Santa programs in 2011. Tracy, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor Martini and council members. Tracy Dominguez, Recreation Superintendent. I'm here to request that you approve receipt of this grant from E.L. Cord of $2,500. It is, as Mayor Martini said, to reinstate these programs. The senior program day trip schedule has been canceled. It was part of the budget cut scenario, and it was missed, and so we thought we'd try to bring it back, and we just had 2 successful trips. It went very well, and then this grant will allow us to continue this program in 2011. And the Breakfast with Santa program was also another casualty of the budget cuts, although seemingly a small program by event standards. It's very, very popular community event, and so it was missed last year when we didn't have it, and we had some people want to step up and help us make it happen, but were unable to do that. They were unable to follow through. So the Nell J. Redfield Foundation funded Breakfast with Santa just this past weekend, and I'm requesting the E.L. Cord Foundation to continue in 2011. It's a small grant, but it's very important to us, and then our other programs, which are bigger, more expensive, I've gone to Redfield for. Hopefully I'll be before you soon with that grant.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. Any questions? If not, we're looking for a motion. Ms. Ratty.
Move to accept the grant as presented.
We have a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilwoman Ratty, seconded by Councilman Kerrigan to approve item 6.2, a grant from E.L. Cord Foundation. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Appreciate it. Keep up the good work. Keep that money coming in. 6.3, consideration, discussion, and possible approval of the Sustainable Spark Services Initiative. Ms. Severson and Mr. Driscoll.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. Chris Severson, Human Resources Manager, and
Steve Driscoll, Assistant City Manager, for the record.
at the City Council retreat of July 27, 2010, the City Council approved the Sustainable Spark Services Initiative, which encompasses pretty much a review of all of the services of the city from the top down. I wanted to take this opportunity to provide you, we want to take this opportunity to provide you with an update on what's been going on, as well as to gain approval of our first top-level organizational chart to implement this program. We have been looking at the key services. The City of Sparks worked with a tool that had all of the departments rank the services that their department provides, and it was ranked on things such as are we legally bound to do this, either through charter or some other regulatory agency? Could this be outsourced or not? Are we required to provide the service? And then also we looked at each of the City Council's objectives and said, does this particular service that the department provide fall under one of the City Council's objectives? And if so, it was given a weighted number. After each department went through, we also went through and attached the budget numbers specific to each key service area. And then what has come out has been a ranking of each department and the services they provide based on either or a combination of the City Council's objectives as well as whether we are legally required to provide that service. I will say it's still a work in progress a little bit. We need to go back to the departments and to calibrate, if you will, some of the terms that we were using, and then eventually we will possibly take everything together and look at the city as a whole. But it's a first step for us, and it's a new endeavor, and we're really pleased with the results that we've attained so far with that. As far as new revenues are concerned, we've asked the Finance Department to go out and to look at all of the department revenue, all of the city revenues, and I believe that they have just are putting the finishing touches on a document that shows us exactly what revenues are charged, what is the presiding document for those revenues, and then the next step is to decide if those revenues are reasonable or not, based on market, based on other services provided in the city. So a lot of work has been done around the revenues. Combining departments and reorganization, we are putting forth an organizational chart today for the executive level. As you all know, we are losing our most beloved Parks and Recreation Director, and we will be looking at the organizational chart to see where that's going to fall and come back to you with a recommendation on that. We also have talked about combining departments. As most of you are aware, in the organization chart presented, we've taken the Public Works Department and the Community Development Department and combined them into Community Services, and we will be then eliminating the position of Public Works Director. We are moving the IT department over to the Financial Services Department, and the Administrative Services Department, the remainder of that will come under the City Manager's Office and be combined with them. We have also developed a competition for services policy, which I believe most of you have had a chance to review, which would allow us to go out and evaluate whether the services we provide in the city are actually the best value for what we can get. And just, it allows us to look at this. It doesn't say we're going to move those outside, but it definitely gives us the opportunity to look at what's out there and to evaluate that.
One of the most important parts of that particular exercise has been determining how we will develop a costing methodology so that we're as close to apples as we can between providing it internally versus providing it externally. We're just about done with what we believe would be a comparable methodology for the first service we would take a look at. Then we'll have to determine how to exactly structure an RFP to where we're dealing with both outside and inside costs to be able to compare those through. A lot of work's been done, looked at a lot of different agencies, not only our own, and I think we're, at least for the first step, just the costing methodology has made us much more aware about what's going on and what we do and how we do it. So I think this is going to be, at the end of the day, whether we do or do not privatize, will be a good decision that we made and be the most effective, efficient way to do it.
Question?
As part of that, so I believe that any organization has a core that needs to be maintained, and that core recognizes that people shift functions when there's a surge, whether that be snow removal or a flood or special event season, as the case may be. And so have we gotten to a point where we know what our core is, particularly for people in the field? Because I think that's part of the privatization. You might be able to say, take mowing and look at that, but But how do, in the context of looking at that, do you also understand that the person who's doing that is currently available in a surge capacity that they would no longer be available for if we privatized?
Certainly. Mr. Reddy, Steve Driscoll again for the record. That has been part of what's taking us a while to get there, is understanding the organization and the services are provided and how those services break down. So, for instance, snow removal is a good example. You may have a lot of other things going on at the same time that our current limited staff is having problems doing day-to-day, and when you have winter maintenance, then you have to go do snow plowing on top of it. What we may find is, rather than shutting down other functions in order to go snow plow, it may make sense to hire outside folks to do the snow plowing function because it is such a quick and high peak and the duration is so short. That's part of the discussion we've had to have and how we're getting to the analysis component of how do you determine what's fair and what to analyze and what's left over. And then the second part becomes knowing all the details. What differential do you have to make it make sense that if you're going to outsource something, you don't have that capability internally to not have that capability. And so we're struggling with how to do this. We've not done it before, and frankly, every organization we've talked to has had a different way of looking at it. So we're having to do an awful lot of commingling of information that we have to get what's right for Sparks before we ever go beyond the initial analysis stage.
Okay. Including that some of those things are reimbursable.
Yes, ma'am.
Factoring in its overtime on a surge, all those pieces.
There's an awful lot of components. You're absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. On one of your bullets, as far as it talks about new revenue, it says the Finance Department has come up with an evaluation tool. Can somebody just shoot me an email, explain to me what that evaluation tool is?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then the next point, I'm sorry. The next point would be employee concessions. As I know that you're aware, the mid-management and executive level have, and confidential, have put forth concessions for the next fiscal year. We will be putting forth a proposal to City Council for discussions with our other bargaining units as well. So that will be forthcoming. Shared services, Mr. Driscoll continues to follow that and work with the shared services team. And we're getting a lot of activity on the other side of town, on the other what is it? West Sparks. Yeah. And lastly, employee communications have been key. The city manager has worked diligently to keep employees involved in what's happening with this phase. One of the struggles, I think, is that everybody wants the answers right now, and we're really working through them, and we don't have the answers just yet. So we ask employees and council to be patient, that it's a process that we're working through. We are, in fact, this week starting meetings, face-to-face employee meetings with the city manager. We've also met with all of the bargaining units as information becomes available. So we've already gone over the organizational structure. I did want to highlight one thing. When we were reviewing the organizational chart and comparing it to city council priorities, there were a couple of areas that really stood out that we need to address as an organization based on your wants as a city council, specifically economic development, sustainability, customer service, code enforcement, and special events. And those will be reviewed for possible action. And with that, we'd be willing to answer any questions.
Questions for Chris or for Steve? Okay. Looking for direction.
Mr. Mayor, if we could, particular to the functional org chart, it would help the manager and his staff for the council to accept that by motion of the functional org charts that you have in front of you. The one caveat being that staff is currently, because of the recent vacancy, will take another look at recreation and decide what's appropriate for that and what that should be. But the rest of what you have in front of you from a functional standpoint, if you could approve that would help us go to the next step, which will go from the division all the way down to every job title within the city for our next step.
Okay. Everyone understand? Need a motion? Mr. Reddy.
So I move to approve the functional org chart as presented, giving the city manager and his team the opportunity to take another look again at the changes that might have been created because of the vacancy in the Parks and Recreation Department.
We have a second, Mr. Lawson.
I'll second.
Moved by Councilwoman Ratty, seconded by Councilman Lawson to approve the org chart. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, before we go on to the next item, this is kind of a good segue into this. We have two people that are leaving, Mr. Seidel and Mr. What's his name? Stu Sheaver. Yeah. Stan Shearer. One head of Public Works, one head of Parks and Recreation. And just for me, I want to take a minute to thank them so much for all the things that they've done for us and the city of Sparks. It's been a great ride. Mr. Seidel doesn't know yet what he's going to do, but I know he'll be very successful in what he does. Mr. Shearer is going to the lovely city of South Lake Tahoe, and I gave you glowing reviews, Stan, when the guy called me, so make sure you live up to everything I said, okay? I'm not worried one bit, and congratulations on all the stuff that you've done for the city of Sparks. It's really incredible. Thanks. Mr. Smith.
You know, and I've thanked them privately, but I'd like to do it publicly also. And we're going to miss both of you. And you've left your stamp on Sparks, and you can see, anywhere you drive, you can see it. So thank you so much for your time with us. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, moving on. 6.4, presentation, discussion, and possible direction or approval of a bill draft request for 2011 Nevada legislative session. Ms. Cluett and Mr. Driscoll.
Good afternoon. Before you today is, we were asked to come back with more information that we received from the LCB on what we could or could not do with our placeholder for the City of Sparks bill draft that's currently there. And the answer that came back from the LCB is the only thing we can do with that is to use the exact chapter and title of which we put forth the BDR. So it would have to be something to do with sales and use tax. So what we need from you today is direction on if you want to go forward with what we have, if you want to go forward with something else completely different, and that would require us finding a legislator to work with over the next 2 days. The 15th is the last day to put anything forth to the legislature, or to just withdraw it, to formally withdraw it from the LCB.
Okay, questions? Mr. Lawson.
Does this functionally mean that the BDR is defunct? I mean, are we going to find someone to sponsor a BDR in 2 days?
You could. It depends on what the topic is. And there could be a very willing sponsor. In practicality, it depends on what the topic is. It depends on how controversial.
I love those yes and no answers.
I'm sorry?
I love the yes and no answers.
Mr. Lawson, I'll step in. Steve Driscoll for the record. We have been advised by a couple of legislators, one from the South, as a matter of fact, that they have a couple of bill drafts available, and they've made it very clear that if we have something that we'd like to use because we're not able to use our one, that if we communicate with them what it is, and as long as that topic doesn't conflict with anything else that they're doing or any position that they've taken during their campaign, then they would be willing to sponsor it. So the problem with that is that there's a couple different people that have different stands. We'd have to shop it. And in this case, we'll have a basic concept and maybe a couple of a little bit of an outline based on what you do today, and then we would have to get on the phone with that outline, and we'd have to ask around, and if someone accepted, then we would have a sponsor. If they didn't, we wouldn't.
Okay. Thank you.
Still no yes or no, but very good explanation. Mr. Smith.
As far as I'm concerned, my position on SP3 is it's done. We're not going to. The citizens voted it down. So from this councilman's point of view, it's gone. you know.
Yeah, for me, for the past 10 years or so, this is how many times we've done this. If we ever go back to this again, I will shoot myself. Not in the foot either. Mr. Kerrigan.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you because I was the one that said I couldn't find it, and so you sent me the email and told me exactly where. And it wasn't that I was doubting you; it's just that I didn't know where it was. So I think we all knew that we were betting on the come when we did this, and we said if the public wants us to do it, we'll do it. If the public doesn't, we won't. I don't care to go out. This is my personal opinion, and go out and find a legislator for something that we really don't care about. I mean, I'm sure there's something out there, but I think how many bill drafts have been put in, requests have been put in so far? 700? I'm not sure that we can stand another 700 laws in the state, or maybe if they were all to do away with something, I'd probably be happier. But anyway, so as far as I'm concerned.
So do you need a motion to
formally withdraw, yes.
withdraw the bill? Okay.
If that's your decision.
Does everyone understand? Everyone okay with that? I need a motion then.
I'll make it.
Okay, Mr. Kerrigan makes a motion. Mr. Lawson. Moved by Councilman Kerrigan, seconded by Councilman Lawson to withdraw our BDR. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And as an aside...
you doing anything else?
No, that was...
You want to introduce
that was it.
Ms. Graves?
We're lucky to have today our CHG and Associates representative, Anya Graves, from Washington, D.C. She's here doing some business, so if you have any questions pertaining to federal, Anya would be more than happy to answer them for you.
Are we okay here just to ask questions or anything if we don't take any action, Chet?
Sure, we'll call it the social hour.
Okay, good. All right. I like it. Okay, any questions for Anya or anything? Or Anya, you got anything you would like to say?
No,
how we
well,
doing?
Washington is in flux. The Congress is currently...
In flux? That's an understatement.
There's a lot of change occurring in Washington, but the current Congress is in lame duck session at the moment, working on the Bush tax extenders bill as well as annual appropriations. And so hopefully we'll have all that information to you by December 31st when they recess.
And you got to watch yourself how you say in flux, too.
Yeah.
Okay?
In the meantime, the fiscal 2012 processes will begin in January, and I believe the council's already passed a set of priorities that we will. I will work with Kathy to submit to our federal delegation. The 112th Congress will be, there'll be a lot of new members. We'll have yet to see what the sort of Tea Party effect will be in Washington. That said, I do think personally that the Senate has not changed a whole bunch, and that we'll still run into the same problems that we've had over the past decade, which is that the House will be quick to act and pass legislation, and then it will take quite a long time for the Senate to actually approve changes. And then if major legislation isn't actually considered in the first 6 or 9 months of the new 112th Congress, then I suspect that they'll run into the presidential campaign politics that will start to occur pretty quickly. So it'll be a rough 2 years for this new and relatively inexperienced Congress.
Questions? Okay. Thanks, Anya.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
6.5, consideration of possible selection of a consultant to provide legislative strategist services for the 2011 Nevada legislature. Mr. Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, Steve Driscoll, Assistant City Manager for the record. This is a culmination of a process that we've been working on for quite a while through the legislative segments that you deal with. You instructed staff to do a request for a proposal for legislative strategist services for the 2011 legislative session. Based on that, with the directions that you provided us, along with the legislative platform that you had approved in the past, the staff came up with an RFP It had 13 points on it. There were 13 different questions that were asked. There was also a grading matrix, which was part of the RFP itself, so that all candidates that responded would see not only what was being asked, but they would see how the grading of those responses would affect the overall scoring. We did have 3 firms respond to the RFP. Once we received those 3, the city had 4 independent graders, individually and separately, grade to the matrix each of these 3 organizations. And then once those grades were developed, the matrix was completed, it was again independently given to the purchasing department, who then compiled the total scores. And as a result of that compilation work, one firm was the unanimous number 1 firm for all 4 graders, and that was the Carrera Group LLC, doing business at Carrera, Nevada. Based on that, staff is suggesting with this agenda item that the council approve and engage through a contract which was attached to this agenda item, a contract for $35,000 for legislative strategist services with Carrera, Nevada, to begin immediately and run through June 30th of 2011 for the purposes of providing the council through its legislative team strategies for the next session. With that, I'm prepared to answer questions.
Questions, Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Steve, did Carrera, Nevada, did they do our 2 years ago or 3 years ago, last time we hired a strategist?
Yes, sir. They were the successful, last time we did an RFP for lobby services, they were the successful company. However, in February of 2009, due to budget constraints, we had to terminate their relationship with us. They did, however, since that point in time, they have, on a pro bono basis, provided some assistance from time to time, and we've worked with them on different issues related to your legislative agenda. But all of the grading and the matrix here was separate from that relationship, and while we certainly appreciate all the work they've done from here, the selection of them as a strategist was based on their answers for this RFP.
And I have no problem with this contract because they worked for us before. What I have issues with, I think where the staff report falls short, is disclosing the grading, the marks. Who are the individuals that did the 4 gradings and their scores? I think that should be made part of public record in something like this, because it is a bid package, it's an RFP. And I've never seen those, and usually that's given to us, that we know who did the grading and what the criteria was. Is this a price issue? What is the issue that separates the groups? And I'd like to get a copy of all that so I have it, so I know how we graded it, so what to expect over the legislative session.
Certainly. This contract's slightly different than a lot of the public works contracts that you see. I'm more than happy to share the graders. The graders are myself, Kathy Cluett, Adam Mayberry, Jeff Cronk. All of us have previous legislative experience and are able to grade those accordingly. The reason that we don't share in these circumstances the grades normally is because sometimes there's proprietary information in the responses or in the answers. And so therefore, under the guidance of the purchasing manager with this type of contract, we work with the number 1 score, especially in this case where it was unanimous between the 4 graders, and we move forward. Just as some background, all 4 provided very reasonable and responsible responses. There just were perceived by all 4 graders deficiencies. They were the consensus number 1, and then the number 2 and number 3 were, the responses were not quite to the same level.
Then I guess of the 2 that aren't recommended here, have they been given the opportunity to see their scores and see what their issues were and see where if there's anything on there that they disagree with? Or, I mean, what's the open process here? I mean, that's
if they individually wanted to come through purchasing and discuss how they rank, that would be done. It would show what the matrix scores were for them. and that would potentially help them for the future. I'm not sure. I'd have to defer to Mr. Marin as to whether they would be given their scores versus others, as, again, we're trying to maintain proprietary information if, in fact, it's there.
One of the things you have to do in any business and able to keep, subcontractors or folks who will be back in bidding in the process is keep them engaged through to find out what they did right, what they did wrong, what are the issues. If, say, a firm was wanting to come in and bid next year, we have a track record of 2 out of 3 years picking the same contractor, we would probably, most firms would say we're not going to go down that path because they already have a track record of who's they're going to pick, so why do we want to spend the time and the energy and everything else like that to formally submit a proposal? So to me, there should be some type of transparency here and some type of notification to everybody on, what, obviously we disclose the criteria to begin with. We need to disclose the ranking of those and how they scored on those items.
We'd be more than happy to have individual conversations with any and all of the 3 firms as it relates to the grading of their firm to the matrix. We'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith?
Well, I guess what I want to say is a couple years ago when Rocky was working with Rob down there, and then we didn't have the money to support Carrera, Nevada, we absolutely got our butts kicked in the last session. And I really don't want to ask this question, but what does Reno pay for lobbyists? Do you know? Because this isn't that much money.
Which one?
Again, Steve Driscoll, for the record, my understanding of the current contract is in the $60,000 range. They had one person who applied and was given that contract. That person has associated with someone else under that same contract from that standpoint.
Is this a not to exceed, or, if something goes on, can you come back, or what does this contract do?
Our contract here, in all 3 instances, we had put in the contract that the budget that had been approved by the council was $35,000. All 3 agencies bid the exact same fixed rate, $35,000. All 3 agencies did basically start immediately upon approval and run through June 30th of 2011. And so while the session is over the first Monday of June of 2011, there is a perception that there will probably be 1 or more special sessions immediately following. All 3 contracts allowed for them to continue their services at least through June 30th for any special session that took place in that point. There were notes by at least 2 of the 3 firms that said, hey, if it goes over and we're still talking about the same topics, we'll carry on. So I felt comfortable that all 3 firms, from a fiscal perspective, bid exactly the same thing and were more than willing to provide services to the council through June 30th, and then to the extent that if there was a little bit of rollover into the 1st of July, I didn't feel that there was any language that said that these professionals would not provide us those carry-on services.
And I think you made my point. They all bid the same amount of money. It wasn't the low bidder we got. They all bid $35,000.
This was more based on some of the answers to some of the 13 questions and the perception, based on what they told us versus what the matrix was asking for.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Any more questions? Okay, if not, looking for a motion. Mr. Smith.
I move to approve a professional services contract with the Carrera Group, LLC, DVA Carrera, Nevada, as presented by staff.
Do I have a second? Ms. Ratty. Second. Moved by Councilman Smith, seconded by Councilwoman Ratty to approve the contract with Carrera, Nevada. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Passed unanimously. Thanks, Steve, and thanks to all the bidders. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, again, Steve Driscoll for the record, in our legislative team meeting today, it was asked if we could get together with the successful bidder, in this case Carrera, as soon as possible. I have had a conversation with the principal. He will have some time over the next 2 weeks, so I will get together with the legislative team and try to get something together as soon as possible, if that's your direction.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Next is consideration and possible acceptance of the city's comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year 2009-2010.
Hi.
Round up the usual suspects. Hi, Debbie.
Exactly. Hi, Mr. Mayor, council members. Debbie Hunt from the Finance Department, and I've got help here from our auditors, Kafori Armstrong, Kristen Burgess, and Dan Carter. Today we're presenting to you the comprehensive annual financial report, which was an extreme challenge this year because we converted computer systems, so we had a lot of extra effort from Kafori and from our staff to get it all in there. They were able to issue an unqualified opinion, which is the cleanest, best, highest grading that they can give. And your presentation to you today will indicate that you're aware of management's responses to their findings and will allow us to distribute this to interested parties. Do you have any questions for them or me?
Questions? Okay. So you need a motion to accept.
Yes, please.
Looking for a motion to accept? Mr. Smith.
It's make a motion to accept the staff's report, the audit. Is that what we're doing right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilman Smith, seconded by Councilman Carey to approve the comprehensive annual financial report for 09-10. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Oh, she's gone. Passes unanimously with those present.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, folks. Appreciate it. 6.7, consideration and possible approval of fiscal policies for the city of Sparks. Mr. Cronk.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Council. What I have before you is actually a continuation of our November 15th workshop. I had to remember that, of the financial policies. It's basically the same document that we went over before in the workshop, just slightly tweaked, if you will, based on some of the input that we received. So the only changes that you would see in there are that, per the conversations that we had that day, I dropped the percentage of salaries from 80% to 78%, as we discussed, and I reordered the order of priority, I guess, based upon what we had talked about, and added a sixth one of possibly discussing the, or considering funding the OPEB liability. So other than that, it's pretty much the same document and the same items that we had discussed. Oh, here it is. What I'm looking for today is direction on, is if this is the direction, the correct direction that we want to go when we're preparing the budget. So that's kind of why it's before you today, to see if this is the policy direction you want to take as we start preparing the budget. And, you know, obviously we're going to cost this out, as we had talked about it before, for our January retreat. But I need to know the direction before we can actually start costing things out. So.
Okay, questions for Jeff? Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jeff, just, you know, a lot's transpired since January, since our, our budget retreat, when we reviewed these things. Just kind of give the council candidate, we know property taxes dropped 8%. That's going to represent, what about another 3% drop in the budget? We've got PERS went up another 2% or something. So we're looking at, since retreat time, we've got an additional 5% or so decrease in the overall revenue for the city.
Not quite that much. Based on from when we met before in November, the numbers. I mean, I slapped on about a 5% drop. That was pretty much on some research that I had done, but not very, you know, nothing coming from the assessor's office. And then since then, we had received about 95% of the parcels, and I had a chance to look at that data dump, if you will, and analyze all the parcels in Sparks. And it was at least within that 95%, still in that 5% drop on property taxes. So that part hasn't changed. Now, granted, there's still, we're not done. That's just the initial look, if you will. Okay. We still have to go through the appeals process, and I haven't heard the final 5%, so to speak. And there's some bigger properties out there, so that's still subject to change. But based on what I know today, it hasn't changed from what we had talked about. And you're absolutely right. Since then, we have heard the PERS rate has increased across the board, 7 to 10%, about 7.5% for the regular members. For police and fire, and then about 10 or 10.5% for the regular members. So that is in addition to what we had talked about. That will be an increased cost of about $600,000 than what we had before. We're still trying to hammer down the increase. We're expecting about a 10% increase on health insurance. I don't have any other information to make me conclude that it's going to change. So really from between then and now, the only real change I have is the PERS rates.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions? Ms. Ratty?
Not a question, comment.
Shoot.
I maintain the same sort of position that I said at the retreat, which is I think it's too much to do in 1 year. I think if we did do this all in 1 year, it gets borne primarily on the backs of our employees, and I think it's just too much. I personally would support a phased approach because I think every single one of these fiscal policies are sound. But for example, in terms of, like, say, the stabilization fund is essentially a rainy day fund. In my opinion, it's still raining. When you start to put money into a rainy day fund is when the economy turns around, when we start to see an uptick, before we start committing those revenues to all of the many things that we'll be tempted to spend them on when it turns around. Make sure we start putting some money into the stabilization fund. But I think trying to do it now when the economy is still headed in a downward direction, like you just reflected, is more than we can bear and not put too much of a burden on the backs of the employees. And when we put it on the backs of employees, that's also putting it on services. And our services are about as tight as they can possibly be. So while I don't think we strive to have, say, our general fund personnel costs being at the percentage where they're at, I don't think we can go so rapidly from point A to point B. I think it's going to take us a couple of years to get there. So that's my personal piece. I'm comfortable with not doing the stabilization fund. I'm comfortable with heading towards an 8.3 ending fund balance as the start of our budgeting, but not necessarily getting there in 1 year. And I don't think we can arbitrarily say 78% is the right number for our personnel costs.
Mr. Lawson.
I also want to agree with Councilman Ratty. I think it's too much too fast. And if this is what we're voting on today, this is the policy, and we're going to live with this in April, then I'm going to have to say no. I thought we would come back to this at the workshop on January 13th or 10th.
Yeah,
so we can still tweak this.
That's absolutely the case.
Okay.
The policies are a guideline, if you will, as far as giving me direction as to how we're going to cost this out. Nothing actually gets approved until, we have a two-step process where we're going to present a tentative budget on or before April 15th.
Perfect.
And then we'll do the final budget. This is just giving me guidelines as far as direction as to how we're going to go ahead and start costing that out. When it comes down to it, the actual vote of what's being budgeted and what's not is a completely different process.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
And I guess the other thing is it all depends on how many of these things we can do. It all depends on revenue. I mean, we can put anything we want in this thing and want to do it, and, wish in one hand, spit in the other, and see which fills up first. So, whether we put these things in there or not doesn't mean they're all going to get done, does it?
Not at all.
I mean, it's something we're shooting for if revenues change. And I agree with one thing, revenues probably are not going to come around enough for us to do all these things, but they're in an order that we would do them and they're prioritized.
Right. And really what we're trying to accomplish, there's a lot of unknowns. I mean, we all know that.
Sure.
The state of flux is absolutely true. It's true with, we've got the legislature. We don't know what's going to happen there. We're still battling a lot of headwinds on this economy. Property taxes may still be tumbling a little bit and so on and so forth. This is just giving us a guideline. Is this the direction we want it to go? Could be all of it, could be none of it, could be part of it.
Sure.
And this is also something that we can carry over year to year. So it is the beginning process of it.
Okay. Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, in many respects, I agree with Ms. Reddy and Mr. Lawson. The reason why I think that this is important is because this is the makings of policy. Numbers aren't attached here. This is a making of policy of what we need to be striving for to be done. If we hadn't had those very painful discussions and arguments about ending fund balances, and the reason why we have policies for that, and the reason why we have dedication of new tax sources to infrastructure and things, we would be in much worse shape than we are today. We wouldn't have survived through the recession. So I think we have to put this as a goal out there, develop budgets for that, and I think that the reason why we do that is because of exactly what you said just a minute ago, the unknowns out there. And that's the reason why I brought up the 5 to 8%, in the property taxes, the PERS, I mean, the state legislature, all those things are coming out, and if we don't take a very conservative approach to the budget here, we're going to find ourselves in the last 30 days of the budget in a whole lot of trouble trying to figure out how to cut. I think we should just go ahead and try to develop the policy, develop the guidelines we want to, develop a budget to those guidelines, and that gives us wiggle room in the future in case those catastrophes keep coming down our way.
Okay, anyone else? Mr. Kerrigan?
Yeah, and I, what I want to say is the same thing I said at the retreat, and that is these are policies, okay? And yes, going down from 90%, which is ridiculous, by the way, to have our salaries and wages be 90% of our budget, to down to 78%. I'd love to see that at one fell swoop. Can we do it? I don't know, but I think that these 6 policies on here are sound, and I don't think we're telling you by voting for these 6 that this is what we want you to do tomorrow. And I think this is just policies that we need to live by. And if everybody remembers, if we wouldn't have held tight on our ending fund balance a couple of years ago, we would have been in really sad shape right now. So I just see this as a policy direction. So.
Miss Ratty, I'm sorry. Yikes.
Well, and I guess that raises a question for me. I mean, listening to Mr. Kerrigan, if we wouldn't have held tight to our ending fund balance, but in the last 2 budget cycles that I participated in, the budget had a reduced ending fund balance below what was policy. Is that not true?
The policy was, I think we had the 8.3% as a policy for a while now, and then the council decided if needed to, we could drop that down to a 5% as a temporary measure to see if we can get through this, not knowing how extensive it was going to be. Is this going to be a 1-year thing or a 2-year thing? So it was a policy decision at that time to break from that original policy, if you will.
It was a policy
so we're kind of going
policy.
back to that policy, yeah.
Right. See, and that's my question. I mean, I have a discomfort with setting policies that we don't intend to follow right off the bat. And so, I mean, I would be comfortable with making a motion that says that we approve these policies with a phased approach, which is one of the options that's in the staff report.
I think that's a given.
But I'm not sure that I'm not sure that, I mean, if it is a given, that's great. Then it's a phased approach. But then I guess the question is the very first budget that we're going to see what it would look like with all of the policies? Are you going to give us scenarios?
I was going to plan on costing out everything. If you approve these policies as our direction, I'll cost everything out, and then it could be a pick and choose. It could be, well, maybe we don't do a full down to 78%. Maybe we do, 84. But the way I'll present it, and hopefully we'll be able to get all the numbers together in January, is just that, so you can start seeing, and it's not going to be just January too. I'm not going to put everything on January because we're going to have some time to develop more, get more information, get more data, and get a clearer picture as to what we're going on. Our real goal is really, like I said before, we have those 2 dates. We have to file a tentative budget, and again, that could very well be a very tentative budget, and then we have to file a final one by June 1st. And then if the legislature does something to affect our budget, we're allowed to file an amended budget. So we've really got, those are my key dates as far as, and a lot can happen between now and then. This is just what I'm looking for is saying, this is the direction we wanted to go, and I'll go ahead and cost it all out, and we'll look at see what the full financial impact is of each policy.
Well, I guess the part where I'm struggling a little bit based on that approach is the amount of time that we have to have conversations with our bargaining units about the concessions that are needed. And so in the process that we did last year, the starting point for that conversation included a 5% ending fund balance. And then it was with that number included that we identified a gap, and then that gap was communicated to the bargaining units, and that's where our starting point for discussion was with concessions. And so if we start with all of these policies in place, that gap is going to be significantly larger. And is that the starting point for our conversation for concessions? I mean, because the process is a long process, and before, there's lots of conversations that have to happen before we get to April. And so I'm not comfortable with the starting point for the conversation for concessions being with every single one of these policies in place. So process-wise, how would that work?
As far as
if you cost it out with all of these in place, then what do you see as the next step?
for concessions, or just in?
Or the conversations with the bargaining units would certainly be part of it.
Yeah, and to your point, there are a lot of balls in the air, and there's a lot of different tracks, and sometimes these are running parallel. I'd say what I'll take from here is being able to say this is the policy that we want to go through, cost them out, and we can, we'd have to look at variables. So to your point, it would come down to different scenarios that we would want to pursue. As far as how concessions and discussions with the unions would play out on that, I'm not sure on that, since I'm not part of the bargaining group, and I would actually probably lean on Mr. Carey for that one.
Mr. Carey.
I think this set of policies is a starting point for us to work with our projections and our expenditures and tie this to our key services, which is a parallel exercise that's coming together. And I'm the first to recognize the council wants to have the connection between its loss of services and where these financial policies will take you. But we do need this roadmap to provide a method of getting there so that they can come together. We do look not to have to change our numbers this year as much as we have had in the past. That is a goal that the management team took from last year's experience. We are looking to cut between $2.8 million and $5.6 million. We're costing those things out, and those will lead to reductions in services. At the same time, you'll be able to adjust where you're making expenditures to reemphasize where your council priorities are. And that ebb and flow of budget process will continue. As it ties to individual employees, they are the strength of our city. They also are the largest cost. And we do need to go into concessions with a policy that we follow. And we keep you informed as those concessions and negotiations continue. And those deliberations occur right up to the time you act upon a recommendation from your negotiating team. And I don't think last year was a negative year. I thought we had good dialogue and good discussions with our employee groups, given the magnitude of the problem we were facing. I think the problem we face this year is equal, but the challenge is greater because we have already reduced so severely. But I would not say to you there was another course other than to follow a linear path, be open to things changing, be open to working with our employees, and be open to having our budget have a sustainable outcome, which is where we started this process many months ago. I hope I addressed your question.
Is that it? Other questions, Mr. Kerrigan?
No, I'm ready to make a motion if there's any questions.
Okay, go ahead.
I move the council accept the fiscal policies outlined by staff.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilman Kerrigan, seconded by Councilman Smith to approve the agenda item as outlined by staff. Any further discussion? Ms. Ratty.
I just would like to share that I won't be voting in support of the motion because I do think that the process for whether or not we will actually be able to follow through in this budget year, I don't think it's clear enough for my comfort level, and I think it's too drastic. These policies are too drastic in the short term for not to be.
Anyone else? Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, I think part of the motion, Mr. Kerrigan, I'd like to see that, this is not a written in stone policy. This is merely a talking points type of thing. We can still move as needed in the future.
Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think one of the things we need to make sure that we separate here is policy and I guess maybe procedure type thing, because we have a policy right now that our ending fund balance would be 8.3% the last 3 years, and we've negated that through our own decisions at the time of budgets to make that difference, because we couldn't make the great difference. We couldn't keep it 8.3 and not lay off some more people. I think setting policy is the direction you're going to go. This council always retains the right at the end of the budget cycle to dedicate every penny for whatever they want to do, and that doesn't. From the policy direction I see it, that does not change. We're still the policy makers, and we also get to have the final say-so on the budget where the money goes to.
Mr. Kerrigan.
Yeah, and that's why, Ed, I'm not going to change my motion, because, this is policy. And the point I brought up is that we had a policy that our ending fund balance was going to be 8.3%. If we didn't have that policy, we wouldn't have the ability to lower it down to 5.3%, because if we would have had no policy, it could have been at 5.3%, and then we could be at 2%. And I remember at one time sitting on the city council, we went down to, $300,000 in our ending fund balance because times were tough. So I think we need to separate what the difference between policy is and our ability later on to take a look at the numbers and decide, and that's why people are elected, is to make those decisions. But I think that everybody in this city needs to see what our policies are, and I think there's sound policies, and I think this is drastic times, and whether we do it in phases, that will be up to us later on. And Julie, you can bring up that argument about maybe going from 90% to 78% in 1 year is too drastic. But I just think that we need to set the policy so everybody knows where we're coming from.
All right, everyone understand the motion? Julia, Ms. Ratty.
I do understand the difference between policy setting and the procedure. I think it's a lot, though. We're talking about there was one policy on an ending fund balance, and we're going from 1 to 7, including a relatively vague one, considering the funding the city's other post-employment benefit, which we don't even know what that looks like. So I would be persuaded to vote for this if we could say, and I know I'm mixing policy and procedure here, that vote to approve the policies and understand that we will be phasing them in this budget year.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, there's a motion on the floor and seconded. Please vote. Passes 4-1. Ms. Ratty against. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay.
Appreciate it. It's never a good or fun conversation, but it's one that has to be had.
One of these days I'll bring you good news.
Okay, we're looking forward to it, pal.
Is that a promise?
Yeah. Okay,
No.
6.8. Consideration and possible approval of a memorandum of understanding, MOU, with Jonasquagas Nugget in the support of a right-of-way trades for I-80 Nugget Avenue off-ramp serving Victorian Square.
Mayor Martini, members of the council, Wayne Seidel, Public Works Director, probably my last official
Duty.
project I'm going to do as I'm leaving the city. This one I've been working on for at least 2, maybe more years. And so it has a lot of history, but it starts back to the 86 agreement that Redevelopment made with NDOT at the time to extend the Rock Boulevard off-ramp off I-80 and get us a west entrance into Victorian Square and to serve the Nugget. Redevelopment invested $1.43 million at that time, and in that agreement with NDOT, the city of Sparks was to acquire the right-of-way. Time went by, negotiations broke down, it's never been acquired. And then through time, Nugget built their tower in '98, about a $100 million project. Terry Reynolds was the city manager. Sean Carey was the public works director. Scott Barnes was the engineer service manager of development and operations. And Sandy Landeck was the right-of-way person at that time. And everyone on staff, in the condition for the tower, Nugget was to do the surveying, bring back the abandonment to the council to the abandon 30 foot of Nugget Avenue between 11th Street to 14th Street. So that is also part of this MOU agreement. What is before you is, it is the action plan. The Nugget requested that we put it in writing, since I've been working on it so long, trying to get this thing to resolution. And then the next piece of it is in the last 2 years, the Nugget invested over $1.5 million into their westerly parking lots. New landscape, lights. They built a driveway to serve those 2 parcels. In that permit, myself, the Public Works Director, requested the dedication of Nugget Avenue from 14th back to the bridge. The city received almost 60,000 square feet in that right-of-way acquisition. It is now a city street. It doesn't match the footprint being proposed by NDOT and as approved by FHWA to do a traffic circle. We'll call it at 15th Street, which is now the driveway. So the MOU outlines the properties we need to trade with the Nugget to finish acquiring the right-of-way. And there's also a parcel that UP Railroad is using. It's parcel 7 that the city currently owns. If we would abandon it today, the railroad would receive it because they're the adjacent property. If we abandoned the whole street, the Nugget would receive everything, half of it to the south, and the UP Railroad would receive the other half, the southerly half. The city was going to abandon it all today. So there's a working through development and entitlements, working with the UP Railroad. We've been in negotiations with them. We'd like to trade. We need about 7,000 square feet from them. There's about 10,000 they're currently using of city property that we can trade as part of this acquiring the right-of-way. So the MOU outlines there's 3 actions that will come back to you. Again, the Public Works Director can receive right-of-way, but we can't give away or transfer right-of-way. It takes council's action to do that. So there's an exhibit in your packet. There's 36,001 square feet that Sparks is going to transfer to John Asquaga's Nugget. Of that 36,000, 564 square feet is under the tower, and under that building permit was going to be abandoned and just never came back to the council. And also in this MOU, the Nugget is responsible to complete, as it was in the building permit, they were responsible to complete the surveying and pay the fees and bring that back to council for the abandonment. And then the city's going to transfer to John Asquaga 19,333 square feet from John Asquaga to the city, what we need to be acquired. And again, this is above and beyond the 60,000 square feet that we've received as part of the street dedication of Nugget Avenue. And then there's a parcel 5A that John Asquaga is going to work directly with NDOT, and per an agreement with NDOT will transfer that parcel as part of the traffic circle proposed, is an agreement between NDOT and the Nugget. And then area 6A and 6B is what the city would acquire from UP Railroad, and we would trade them our 10,023 square feet. Again, this is the groundwork, the MOU for the action plan. All those future actions and transfers will come back to you for action in the future. I know I had a question on why did it take so long to get to December. I had planned on being here a year ago, and actually we got to open the driveway for the special events, working with NDOT for the 3 special events. We got it permitted this year to remove the barrels, use the driveway. But also, as I got that special use permit for this season, I said I would give them an update by the end of the year, and which was about 6 months, was going to be in November. So, so again, my last formal capacity as the Public Works Director is hopefully move this far enough along to get some action, the action plan approved for future transfers and trades to come back to you as the council. So with that, I'd open it up for questions. And
questions for Wayne. Mr. Kerrigan.
Yeah, Wayne, I just have 2 questions. On the traffic circle, the roundabout, who's that going to benefit?
It is going to benefit, it's NDOT's traffic circle as approved by FHWA. It does improve the circulation at 15th Street. We get two-way traffic versus the single, the off-ramp now is all single, single direction down to 14th Street. So there is some improved access to that first parking lot over time, depending on if there could be another parking structure in there. And we also need that, the other 8 points of control for I-80 under federal standards is it has to end at a termini of a public street.
Okay, and there's a price tag for $350,000.
Correct.
What's portion of that is the city going to pay?
We did invite NDOT because I believe you guys did want to ask that question. Ken Cooper was invited to this. My understanding, and as your Public Works Director, through December, in the action that would come back to you, once this property is acquired, through your action, and you can certify the right-of-way, there will have to be a transfer, and I think that's part of the original agreement. It isn't clear who is going to get the right-of-way. It says city acquire, it doesn't say give it or keep it. So I would recommend to my staff that's following behind me that in the negotiations with NDOT, that if they either build the traffic circle, and if they don't want to build the traffic circle, that they can buy the right-of-way from the city of Sparks for your part of the traffic circle.
Okay,
Part acquisition.
Yeah, because my next question was going to be, the last time we needed right-of-way was our road, I think, that we built, the Avenue of the Oaks built through, correct?
North of I-80, yes.
Right. And did we do the land swap on that? How did we acquire the right-of-way for that? Did we not have to pay the nugget for their property?
Yeah, I believe Armando
Okay, so now we're going to, so when we need something, the city needs something from the nugget, they charge us. When they need something from us, we give it to them. That's how I see it.
I can see that in principle. Again, but we've received, again, if you look at square foot, and that was trading one for one and paying for the surplus square foot, and I believe it was $250,000. Armando Ornelas was in those discussions, and you guys approved that action. Here, the Nugget, private property, they've dedicated to the city of Sparks for a public road, 60,000 square feet. We have 25,000 under the tower. That was public road that we're going to put back on the tax rolls, and that's been one goal of mine as a public works director. If it's surplus right away, let's get it to someone who can use it and put it back on the tax rolls. So we are, if we were going to pay dollars here, if it was pure square foot per square foot, we would be owing the Nugget because we received more square foot for road in this negotiations than what we received.
Okay.
Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could just add on to that, that we'd be paying the 1987 rate, and not the 2010 rate. Am I correct?
It has changed.
So, I mean, again, we're not, it seems like apples and oranges seem to be the topic of conversation today, so I just want to make sure that 1987 was a whole different world back then than it is today. I have two questions. First of all, it doesn't appear you're going to have a resolution. As I said, I wanted to have on this item is who's paying for the roundabout? That's the question I have. Who's paying for all this stuff? I mean, and we said we're going to have NDOT here to go ahead and say that NDOT, and it refers several times throughout this thing that NDOT is going to construct it. Where's that agreement that they're going to construct it?
Well, I would anticipate, that's a great question. This MOU doesn't have NDOT, but ultimately, I believe in their original agreement, when they say acquisition, Sparks was supposed to transfer it to them. It is not clear in that agreement. And I would advise to you as your Public Works Director that in the negotiations, once this is acquired and we're sitting down with NDOT for the transfer, that 87 agreement will probably be amended to, for that meeting of the minds on who's going to build the traffic circle. They can't speak on it today.
My other, and this is the overarching.
Just a point. The city council would have to formally decide it was going to invest in the traffic circle as an item of your agenda at a time when we knew what the cost of construction was and what the parties will be. We're not asking for your authority to spend money to build that road today. I think that what you're being asked to do is to accept a course of action that will lead to the resolution of a long-standing right-of-way problem between three parties and put us in the best position to negotiate the Nevada Department of Transportation building this roundabout to make sure that our freeway system and its access is properly completed. And I can't guarantee you they will pay that, but before the city of Sparks pays for that, it would come back to you as what parties are doing what, and we're not authorized or seeking to spend money on capital construction at this time. We're trying to clean up a right-of-way situation which will, we believe, benefit the interstate highway system, benefit the city, and benefit the Nugget. And I think that on the record, I would state to you that it's my assurance that we will bring back any policy consideration for investing in this roadway to you before the staff negotiates it.
And my last question is, what portion of this whole thing cannot be done without this memorandum of understanding?
I believe I owed well, actually, the MOU was requested by the Nugget, and just because it's has been going on for so long, that course of action, and they're as nervous with NDOT as we are nervous with NDOT. So, like Sean Carey said, trying to set the course of action, identifying the parcels, the trades, and the best course of action, and get in understanding. The MOU is to say, let's agree on this course of action. So, after, I would say, if this is not approved today, then the next course would be what actions from the city manager to the staff to continue on with working with NDOT and the Nugget to resolve this.
I guess my question is, is anybody on staff, anybody on city council, anybody with the city of Sparks ever said or gave any kind of sign to the general public, to the Nugget, to NDOT, we're not interested in resolving this issue?
You know, I guess the issue is very, very complex when you involve the Department of Transportation, the FHWA, and resolving issues which date back as far as 1987. And I can assure you that the planning for that interchange began 5 to 7 years ahead of that. So I believe that the staff, in asking you to adopt this action plan, you're giving us the kind of action plan that the Nugget, the FHWA, and NDOT want to see, to know that this issue is going to be brought to resolution and conclusion on the right-of-way. And I think if your action today sends any message, it's that we are a partner in keeping our promises to the original construction of Nugget Avenue and insisting that all parties come together to clean this issue up.
Is that it, Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
You know, to me, this is just completing the process that was started 20-something years ago. And I agree with everybody else. I don't want to pay $350,000 or $100,000 or anything. So if we can get the property together, that's the beginning of the process of NDOT actually taking over and building the roundabout or whatever they're going to put in there. So, I mean, I can support this. I wish they were here from NDOT so I could ask that specific question. But I'm in favor of the MOU. I'm not in favor of paying any money for the roundabout.
Mr. Ratty.
I think you and whoever else worked on this are a miracle worker. I think you're coming together with an agreement and concept that includes the Federal Highway Authority, NDOT, the railroad, the Nugget, and we should be the last people holding this up because it benefits the community. And there are plenty of safeguards because it's going to come back, and I'm sitting here hoping that it's going to hold up through all the various phases that it needs to go through after this. But I think it's absolutely us saying, let's work in good faith, let's move this forward, let's get it done, and let's get it right for the city of Sparks. And lots of chances to dig into the details as you bring, or your successors bring pieces forward. So I support it. And I think that communication is often a difficult process, And with something this complex, putting it in writing is absolutely the right thing to do, because it's something that we can all look back at and say, this is what we meant. And if more had been put in writing back 20 years ago, we might not be in the position that we're in today. So I absolutely support this.
Mr. Kerrigan.
Yeah, the city manager brought up a good point, and that was talking about the city council voting on a promise that was made in 1987. I want to remind everybody, the last time we voted on a promise, there were 4 lawsuits and 2 ethics complaints, and a whole lot of heartburn.
Mr. Lawson.
Well, thanks, Mike, because I'm going to disclose that I have met with the Nugget, Michon Esquaga, and Larry Harvey about this issue, and that YESCO has done business with the Nugget in the past. But with that being said, I'm going to support this motion, because I think we do need to just get it cleaned up and get down the road, and we'll see where it comes. If the roundabout ever comes about from that, then great. If it doesn't, at least it's not in our hands anymore.
That's where I'm coming from. I support this totally from, it's been around here since 1986. It's time to get this thing done, and having it in writing makes me feel much more comfortable, and I know what Mike's referring to, a little casino we tried to get done on the Pyramid Highway, and it was all he said, she said, because it wasn't all directly in writing right. So to me, this is a way to put an end to this whole thing and get it done. And ultimately, if we don't do something, ultimately, I think I've been told what's going to happen is that this off-ramp could be closed by FHWA, and I don't think anybody wants that to happen. So, okay, any other questions, comments? Looking for a motion. Mr. Smith.
Move to approve.
Do we have a second? Ms. Ratty.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Smith, seconded by Councilwoman Ratty to approve the agenda item as outlined by staff MOU. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Passes 3-1 with 1 abstention. Mr. Kerrigan is a no. Mr. Schmidt is an abstention. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne. Take a stand. Okay, where are we at? Comments from City Council and City Manager. Ms. Ratty.
Fabulous parade. I just want to give kudos to the Parks and Public Works Departments and anybody else who, police, fire, everybody that had to be involved in pulling off what is just so much fun every year. And I hear such great feedback from people in Sparks who come down and enjoy that parade, and people from outside the region, frankly. So congratulations to everybody. It was a lot of fun, and I look forward to it next year.
Mr. Smith.
2 words, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Okay, anyone else? Seeing no further business, we are adjourned.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the redevelopment agency meeting of Monday, December the 13th, 2010, and I want everybody to sit tight because this is going to take a while. With a roll call. Here.
Agency Secretary Patterson here. Agency members Ratty. Here. Lawson. Here. Martini.
Here.
Kerrigan.
Here.
Schmidt.
Here.
Chief Administrative Officer Carey.
Here.
Agency Attorney Adams.
Here. I think. Okay, I'll open up the public comment. I do not have any cards. Anybody wishing to speak at this time? Mr. Manager.
We did receive a letter from the Sparks Heritage Museum. Anthea Humphreys wanted to make a letter submission to the redevelopment agency at today's meeting. I have a copy for you, and the clerk will retain a copy.
Okay. Any other public comment? I will close the public comment and bring it back to the agency. Approval of the agenda. Anybody want to take anything out of order?
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Recommendation to approve the minutes of the regular redevelopment agency meeting of November the 22nd, 2010. Any changes or? Okay.
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Report of claims and bills for November 4th, 2010 through December 1st, 2010. Looking for a motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Passes unanimously. Comments from the agency and chief administrative officer. Any comments? Then we are adjourned.